Hello everyone and welcome to Africa's Craziest, where we bring to you the good, the bad, and the outrageous insights about Africa. In today's video, we are taking a look at the top 10 countries with the best education system in Africa. Before we get started, kindly click on the subscription button and notification bell to be notified each time we put up a new video. Also remember to like, comment, and share if you find the video interesting. Educational growth in African countries ensures that better academic requirements can be implemented to grow a literate nation. While many African countries are still developing, some have shown significant educational progress. Education, as Nelson Mandela said, is the most powerful weapon you can use to change the world. So, which African countries have the best education system? According to Bscholarly, here are the top 10 African countries with the best education system so far. The rank looks at the general level of skills of the workforce and the quantity and quality of education in each country. While the concept of educational quality is constantly evolving, important quality factors today include developing digital literacy, interpersonal skills, and the ability to think critically and creatively. At position number 10, we have Namibia. Namibia has a population of 2.34 million, and the country is ranked 100th in the global education system and 10th in Africa, with a score of 52.7 points. The literacy rate in Namibia is 88.2%. At independence in March 1990, a new teaching and learning paradigm had to be developed that would dismantle the previous regime's policy of segregation and inequality of access, and that would reflect the new government's priorities of equity, access, quality, and democracy in education. The National Institution for Education and Development, NIED, one of the branches of the Ministry of Education, Culture, Youth, and Sport, was entrusted with the task of reforming and developing the curriculum, integrating the national language policy with English as the official language. The goal of the new education plan was that all Namibians would acquire basic literacy and numeracy skills and a basic understanding of natural phenomena within a few years. Increased funds were provided for adult and non-formal education, and there were increased educational opportunities for girls. While racial segregation was prohibited, the establishment of private schools, including Afrikaans or German medium schools that appealed mainly to whites, were tolerated by the new government. A new university, the University of Namibia, raised the level of the country's education, and much attention was paid to in-service teacher training as many teachers were ignorant of curriculum and syllabus development, having based their teaching on textbook content. Teachers were encouraged to participate in a democratic education system where both they and their students were creative and proactive. At position number 9, we have Egypt. Egypt is ranked 9th in Africa with 52.8 points. The country is also rated the 99th best country in the world, with a 71% literacy rate. Current educational philosophy in Egypt is the product of three cultural heritages: British, secular, westernized, Egyptian, and Islamic, traditional, Egyptian. The British protectorate in Egypt left an exclusionary, state-controlled education system structured to serve elite, British, interests with little concern for the masses. The heritage was one of restricted opportunity, unenforced limited education, generally of poor quality, and higher education reserved mostly for the elite. Egyptians and non-English foreigners were left with few options but to expand private and religious education. Muhammad Ali, regarded as the father of modern Egypt and its education system, introduced a secular, modern, Western educational philosophy complete with sciences. Egyptian leaders since the bloodless revolution that ended the monarchy in 1952 have espoused this approach, viewing it as essential to Egyptian development. Islamic education remained in place and, eventually, the traditional Islamic and the Western educational tracks, with their differing orientations, created a dichotomized educational culture that persists to the present. The Islamic heritage is an educational system, parallel to public education, that is basically a system of transmitting culture. From its founding in 972 until the modern period in the 19th century, Al-Azhar University Mosque played a central role in shaping the country's religious, educational, and cultural life. At the bottom of the Islamic educational system were kuttabs, mosque or Quranic schools, the madrasas, religious schools, and the Sufi, mystical orders. Resting on memorization and recitation, the traditional methods for learning the Quran, this educational system does not stress experimentation, problem-solving analysis, or learning by doing. Education is conceived as a process that involves the complete person, including rational, spiritual, and social dimensions. The Arab/Muslim heritage carries an orientation that transcends national boundaries to include all Arabs and Muslims. From 1922 on, Nasser offered free education, not only for Egyptians, but also for students from other Muslim countries. At the same time, Egypt sent teachers and administrators out to the rest of the Arab world where they set up and staffed schools and universities on a large scale. At position number 8, we have Cape-Verde. Cape-Verde ranks 98th in the global education system and number 8th in Africa, with 53.3 points. The Republic of Cape-Verde, an archipelago of 10 islands and 5 islets located 385 miles off the northwest coast of Africa, is in the unenviable position of having to import approximately 80 to 90% of its foodstuff and of being prone to droughts leading to famines. These factors and others, including high unemployment, impact the educational system. The independent, 1975, Republic of Cape Verde inherited 75% illiteracy from the Portuguese. The official language is Portuguese, however, it is not the language in common use. At the time of independence and regularly thereafter, it was proposed that students have lessons in Cape Verde Creole, a mixture of Portuguese and West African languages, which is the language most commonly spoken. The proposal has not yet been accepted because some officials feel that Cape Verde Creole is simply an offshoot or dialect of Portuguese and, therefore, not a valid language. However, efforts in the late 1990s, including work at public schools in Boston and Brockton with a high proportion of Cape Verde immigrants, have led to a proposed alphabet for Cape Verde Creole that reflects actual pronunciation. This alphabet, Alupec, was introduced in Cape Verde for a provisional 5-year trial. If the alphabet is successful and accepted, it will become the government-sanctioned standard for Cape Verde Creole, the first step in accepting Cape Verde Creole as the official language of government and, thus, instruction. At the 7th position, we have Kenya. Kenya ranks 7th in Africa with 55.4 points and is rated the 95th best country in the world, with a 78.7% literacy rate. It is estimated that the Kenyan government invests 17.58% of its budget in the educational sector. Missionaries introduced Western education in Kenya. The first missionaries to settle on the East African coast were Portuguese Roman Catholics. By 1557 they had established monasteries at Mombasa and Lamu, Kenyan coastal towns. The second wave of Christian missionaries included the Lutherans, who were sent to Kenya through the Church Missionary Society, CMS. Among these were Johann Ludwig Krapf, Johann Rebmann, and Jacob Irhad. The partition of Africa in 1884 established British rule in Kenya and led to an increase of Christian missionaries. As the missionaries established themselves on the mainland, they started schools as a means of converting Africans to Christianity. Their acceptance was somewhat due to the fact that they used the schools as a means of rehabilitating slaves who were returned after having been captured by Arabs. The Arabs had established themselves earlier on the coast and had already introduced some schools where they taught the Quran. Thus, the Christian missionaries had to move further inland, away from the Muslims where they could easily rehabilitate the returned slaves. Later, the British colonial government started to urge the missionaries to expand the educational system to include a technical focus in the curriculum in addition to religion. Although some were reluctant, for fear of losing the monopoly of schools to the government, some went along and even received funding. The current educational curricula, commonly referred to as the 844 system, consists of 8 years of primary education, 4 years of secondary, and 4 years of university education. According to Sifuna, 1990, there are 3 events that led to implementation of the 844 system: the 1966 Conference on Education at Kericho in Kenya, which stressed the need for integrating rural development. The International Labour Organization Mission Report entitled Employment, Incomes and Equality, a Strategy for Increasing Productive Employment of 1972, and the recommendation of the National Committee on Educational Objectives and Policies of 1975. In 1979, the Ministry of Education was changed to the Ministry of Basic Education with an introductory 9-year basic education system program. The rationale was that the previous program was too short and not rigorous enough to give graduates enough practical education. It also recommended that the first 6 years of primary education were to concentrate on numeracy and literacy skills and the last 2 years on basic education with practical orientation. This represented a shift from a focus on enrollment to restructuring the program as a means to cater to the influx of unemployed. The 21st century educational reform proposals are under review because the systems have failed to meet the original purpose. The system in Kenya has been described as a burden to both teachers and pupils due to the wide scope expected in the numerous subjects studied. The failure of the system is blamed on financial constraints and inadequate training of the implementers. Between 1980 and 1990, Kenya faced tremendous growth of privately owned schools and higher education institutions, while the government schools deteriorated. There are also several private schools that offer an international curriculum, including the London Education and International Baccalaureate, GCE, among others. At position number 6, we have Botswana. Botswana holds the 6th position in Africa with a score of 56.7 points. It is also rated the 92nd best country in the global education system. With a population of 2.3 million, the literacy rate in Botswana is 88%. Education in Botswana is free, but it is not compulsory. The Ministry of Education has authority over all of Botswana's educational structure except the University of Botswana. The educational structure mirrors that of the United Kingdom. There is universal access to primary and junior secondary school, but a process of academic selectivity reduces entrance to the senior secondary school and the university. However, educational curricula incorporate pre-vocational preparation in the junior and senior secondary schools. Education has been given priority in the national budget. In the 1994 to 1995 financial year, the Ministry of Education received 10% of the national budget. The Department of Secondary Education and Teacher Training and Development shared 64%, and the ministry headquarters, which was responsible for 4 projects including the University of Botswana and Brigades Development, received 25%. The 11% balance was spent on improving facilities and functions under the technical education, non-formal education, curriculum development, and evaluation and special education departments. The Ministry of Education expanded from a small unit of government in 1966 to one that looks after the educational needs of hundreds of thousands of students from primary to tertiary levels. In addition, the ministry writes all required textbooks. The ministry's emphasis is on training qualified teachers, developing a diversified curriculum, and expanding facilities to meet the national commitment of universal education. The concern for achieving national literacy is underscored by the fact that 40.6% of the country's population is under the age of 15. Botswana's first educational policy, called Education for Kagisano, Social Harmony, guided the country's educational development and administration from 1977 to 1993. In the early 1990s, the recognition that the country's socio-economic situation had changed significantly resulted in a review of policies and strategies for Botswana's educational development. In March 1994, the Minister of Education presented Government Paper No. 2, the revised National Policy on Education. Its recommendations will provide direction for Botswana's educational system until 2020. The education system makes minimal provisions for children with disabilities. Few disabled children are integrated in regular school classes, and there is a limited special education curriculum. Parents must pay fees to non-governmental organizations if their special needs children are educated. However, the government has committed to intensify efforts to educate these children by paying the non-governmental organizations' fees. At the 5th position we have Tunisia. The Tunisian educational system ranks 71st among the best worldwide, with a 61.4 points rate of excellence. This country has invested 20% of its national budget into the educational sector and ranks 49th position for school life expectancy and 51st for pupil-to-teacher ratio in primary education. The academic year 1999 to 2000 saw almost 2.3 million students enrolled in Tunisian schools from the primary through university levels. The same year, net enrollments of primary students ages 6 to 12 was higher than 92%. Of youth ages 19 to 24, nearly 17%, 180,000 young women and men, were enrolled in universities in 1998 to 99. Foreign influence. Because the French administrative system was used to structure the Tunisian government when Tunisia was governed as a French protectorate, the Tunisian government-supported education system is infused with many of the principles and structures of the French educational system. However, Arabic is currently used as the language of instruction in Tunisian public schools, with French taught as a second language starting in the 3rd year of primary school and English taught as a third language beginning in the 7th year of school, i.e., the first year of secondary school. Only fairly recently did Arabic become the official language of government in Tunisia, and French and Arabic are both used as languages of commerce. Other foreign languages are also offered to Tunisian students as they proceed through the secondary grades. Fundamentalism in Tunisia shouldn't, however, be overestimated or confused with ordinary expressions of Islam, which, according to Ennahda, the government-banned Renaissance Party, is precisely what the government does when public employees caught praying at work are earmarked as religious zealots. Even in the absence of politicizing fundamentalists, Islam plays an important role in most Tunisian lives right from birth. The fact that 98% of the Tunisian population is Muslim reflects the depth of Muslim traditions in the country, mirrored by the wish of many Tunisians to live a life that balances worldly demands with religious practices and aspirations. The 4th position we have South Africa. The literacy rate in South Africa is 94%. This country is rated the 4th best country in Africa in educational development with 58.4 points. It also holds the 84th position in the global education system. In the year 2000, approximately more than 52 million children and youth, 50.5% of them female, were enrolled in 29,386 primary and secondary schools in South Africa. In addition, 125,000 students, youth and adults, were enrolled in technical colleges, 300,000 students, 54.6% female, were enrolled in universities, and 190,000 students, 45.5% female, attended technikons, vocational and technical tertiary level schools. Formal education in South Africa falls into 3 categories. General education and training, incorporating a preparatory year and students up through grade 9. Further education and training, covering grades 10 through 12 for regularly enrolled youth, out-of-school students, adult learners, youth and adults enrolled in technical, youth, and community colleges, industry-based education and training initiatives, and other non-formal instructional programs. Higher education, which includes a broad range of educational institutions and programs leading to certificates, diplomas, and degrees. The 3 levels of education are integrated in a national qualifications framework as outlined by the South African Qualification Authority Act of 1996 that aims to establish a seamless system of education for South Africans of all ages and instructional levels. Nearly all the schools at the primary and junior secondary levels were publicly funded. Enrollments in private primary schools represented only 1% of the total primary enrollment in 1995. At the pre-primary, senior secondary, and tertiary levels, growth in the number of private institutions has been observed since 1994, particularly with the educational reforms stimulated by the various education acts passed in the 1990s and later. At the 3rd position we have Mauritius. This country is rated the third best in Africa with 61 points in the educational system and ranks 74th in the global education system. Schooling in Mauritius is compulsory up to the age of 16. The country is also ranked 47th in the world in vocational training because of its reputation for providing high-quality programs. The Education Act of 1993 requires children between the ages of 5 and 12 to attend 6 years of primary school. Enrollment is 98%, and roughly 50% of all students are female. The official language of instruction at all levels is English. Nearly 78% of 4-year-old children also attend pre-primary schools. Students must pass a national examination, conducted by the Mauritius Examination Syndicate, MES, to receive a Certificate of Primary Education, CPE, and gain admission to secondary school. All students at the secondary school level, enrollment is 60% of children aged 12 to 19 years, 51% of whom are girls, attend 3 years of general courses, lower level. An additional 2 years of courses, upper level, prepare secondary students to earn one of 2 diplomas, the Cambridge School Certificate or the Cambridge Higher School Certificate. The University of Cambridge Local Examination Syndicate, along with the MES, oversees the final examinations for secondary students. Only 15 to 20% of all students earn a higher school certificate, while less than 2% of all students actually enroll at an institution of higher learning. Private schools are commonplace in Mauritius mainly because the Education Act allows any business or individual in the country to create a primary or secondary school. The Private Secondary Schools Authority oversees government funding to private institutions. Private post-secondary institutions must be approved by the Industrial and Vocational Training Board and are subject to audit by the National Accreditation and Equivalence Council. State-owned secondary schools are all equipped with a minimum of 10 computers. Private schools seek out grant funding for instructional technology. Similarly, science classrooms in state schools are furnished with laboratory implements, while private institutions receive loans to fund the purchase of similar equipment. Textbooks are free to all primary school students. Secondary school students must pay for their texts, which are standardized at the lower level and selected by school-based curriculum committees for upper-level courses. At the second position we have Algeria. Algeria is the second country with the best education system in North Africa. It is the 5th best in Africa with 57.4 points, and the literacy rate in the country is 75%. The educational system is structured into primary foundation school for 9 years, followed by secondary education school for 3 years, and then the tertiary, university, level. Algerian education is still grounded in the French fact acquisition orientation, and teaching is almost exclusively in the lecture and memorization mode. In 1996, the total enrollment at primary and secondary schools was equivalent to 86% of the school-age population, 89% of the boys, 82% of the girls. Enrollment at primary schools in the relevant age group was 97% for boys and 91% for girls. A 1995 UNICEF study reported that early childhood education services for children up to 6 years of age were limited. Fewer than 50,000 children were enrolled, exclusive of those in Quranic preschools. Quranic schools accommodate large numbers of preschool children. Of those enrolled, 10% of children up to 3 years old were in nurseries and 90% of 3 to 6-year-olds were in kindergartens. 55% of those in kindergarten were urban children. Estimates in 1995 of the percentage of preschool-aged children enrolled in some form of preschool, including Quranic schools, ranged from 3 to 20%. Reports from 1995 indicated that no preschool services existed for children with special educational needs except for special sections in kindergartens attached to primary schools for those with hearing impairments. Pre-primary schools are conducted in Arabic and are not compulsory. The foundation school, École fondamentale et polytechnique, replaced the French 10-year compulsory school model with a 9-year model. Primary and middle schools were combined, scientific and technical literacy stressed, and closer connections sought between schooling and work. Classes are taught in Arabic, with French considered the first foreign language. Students are oriented either toward secondary school or toward vocational training. In 1995 to 1996, a total of 347,410 students enrolled in higher education. Admission is based on the student quota for each institution, set by the ministry, and grades. Allocation to fields of study depends on how well students did in primary subjects in each field. The teaching staff is largely Algerian. In a radical reversal of policy, the Haute Commissariat at El Amazigh was created, following an 8-month boycott of school by nearly 1 million students, and Berber dialects, Amazigh, were introduced into the schools in 1995 by decree of the president. This was a tremendous political-cultural victory for the Berbers. Amazigh means free men. Barely 15 years earlier, scribbling a few words in Tifinagh, the characters of the Berber language, meant a stay in prison. 1/3 of the 48 provinces introduced pilot classes in Berber in the last year of middle school, 9th year, and the first year of high school, 10th year. Training courses for teachers were organized and exams planned for the Brevet d'enseignement moyen, middle school certificate, and for the baccalaureate. Now on the number 1 spot is Seychelles. An island country in East Africa with a population of 98,347 people, Seychelles is the first and only African country to fully accomplish UNESCO's Education for All aim. The country's educational system is also the only one in Africa to be ranked among the top 50 systems in the world, placing 43rd overall, ahead of Ukraine, Hungary, Russia, and the United Arab Emirates. It holds the position for the best education system in Africa, with 69.3 points. Seychelles is an archipelago in the Indian Ocean made up of about 115 islands, most of which are uninhabited. With an area of 455 square kilometers, Seychelles is about 2.5 times the size of Washington, D.C., and is the second smallest country in Africa. The country has a population of approximately 80,000 people with an average life expectancy of nearly 70.5 years. The inhabitants are Seychellois, which is a mixture of Asians, Africans, and Europeans. Approximately 90% of the people are Roman Catholics. The predominant languages are English, French, and Creole. In 1995, the literacy rate for the population was 85%, with the definition of literacy being age 15 and over who can read and write. The country has a legal system based on English common law, French civil law, and customary law. In 1985, the Ministry of Education produced a new version of education titled Education for a New Society, which laid the groundwork for many changes in the education system. In 1990, the country's president announced a number of wide-ranging improvements to education, later called 1991 Education Reform. In 1994, the Education Management Division in the Ministry of Education initiated the School Improvement Program project, and in 1999 the policy of education reform was begun. The purpose of these reforms in Seychelles has been to improve access and quality of education through a coherent and comprehensive system. As a result of the 1999 education reform, a new section of management has been established in the Principal Secretary's office. This section, called the Education Planning Council, functions to make policies, coordinate improvements, and monitor the country's educational plan. Between 1990 and 1997, a major school reconstruction project was completed. The major purpose of the project was to bring all schools in Seychelles up to minimum standard levels in physical structures, materials, resources, equipment, and textbooks. The government has established an adult literacy program, which is administered by the Ministry of Education. The basic components of the adult education program match those of the other education programs. The major goal of adult education is to reach a literacy rate of 90%. Education reforms, budget expenditures, and emphasis on educational equity for all are evidence of Seychelles' dedication to its inhabitants. The government stresses accountability, productivity, and technology mastery as elements to ensure the success of its education system as the method to prepare its inhabitants to operate confidently in this modern world. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, like, comment, and why not share it with your network. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video on some of the craziest things about Africa.